cop pointed his gun at the black man and laughed when he saw the badge. USSS? You serious? He scoffed like he just caught a wannabe. But minutes later, he was the one in cuffs, surrounded by phones recording every second. Beat me up. What state are you in? Does this happen where you live? Watch till the end to see who gets exposed and who walks away with the truth. His fist met her defiance, the gun glinting ominously in the harsh glare of the streetlights. Silence blanketed the alley, thick and suffocating, as the crowd gathered around the escalating scene. They watched with bated breath, hearts pounding in unnerving synchronization. The black man stood, unmoving, his eyes an impenetrable abyss of calm strength. A subtle shift in his stance hinted at a power unknown to those around him. His heart held secrets the officer across from him couldn't fathom. What would you do if injustice echoed through your veins? Would you stand silent or linger to uncover the truth beneath the siren's wail? The officer's arm was steady, the gun trained unwaveringly on the man's chest. It was supposed to be a routine stop, a broken tail light, a conversation, and go on your way. But moments can change in an instant. This was one of them. The man, a metaphor of poise amidst chaos, breathed deeply as if drawing strength from the depths of the city around him. The officer, meanwhile, paced back and forth, attempting to tame the chaos continually spinning in his mind. He was a veteran of the force, a man who had faced danger, but this was different. The scenes playing out before him weren't written in crime manuals. Fear masked his authority. Behind the mask of his resolve, the black man clutched a piece of paper, crumpled and worn. His badge lay hidden within, a shield against injustice only he knew how to wield. Yet he chose to wait, silent, letting the night swallow his pride and masquerade his position. The crowd assembled was an amalgam of whispered prayers, a soft murmur of fear and hope, as if the city itself held its breath alongside them. Murmurs spread like wildfire in hushed undertones, the crowd now balancing between despair and the cusp of action. They gathered, recorded, fear in their eyes matched only by their resolve, a digital eye that saw past the darkness, into truths that had been shuttered for too long. A memory flashed before the black man's eyes, one not so different from this night, a time, a place, an unexpected encounter. His father, once trapped in a similar bind to justice, suspended in the air, like a forgotten melody. Tonight promised a different ending, he hoped. Reflection flickered in his eyes, casting them deeper, beyond the simple labels others were so quick to ascribe. The officer obliviously continued, his ignorance a spark in the powder keg of the moment. His voice, arrogant and loud, grated against the serene night. He chuckled, a harsh noise that broke the night's rhythm, the gunshot of a laugh. "What could you possibly do?" he taunted, a grotesque echo against the backdrop of injustice. The man remained silent, gaze unwaveringly fixed on the officer. His eyes bore stories untold, a history unwritten by anyone but himself. He waited, knowing well the intricate dance of patience and power. Minutes seemed to stretch, though they were mere seconds, a languid illusion only the imminence of change can conjure. But in those seconds the city's soul collectively inhaled. Legends of resilience passed down generations seemed to uncoil across the man's shoulders, transforming resolve into tangible strength. Here stood a figure not just at the mercy of the moment, but a bearer of its weight. The officer's radio sputtered to life, the call of his partner breaking through his thoughts, like glass shattering in the silence. The black man's demeanor did not falter. His presence suddenly struck the officer as endless, an immovable force against his fleeting bravado. There was a flicker of something else in the officer's eyes now. A recognition barely formed. He faltered, just slightly, as the realization swept in a tide unyielding. The man in front of him was not just another number to be cataloged on a report. He was a figure steeped in silent authority. The badge came into view like a specter in the haze of lights, a revelation caught in the flash of bystanders' cell phones. The United States Secret Service emblem, unmistakable and irrefutable, glistened in the dark, far brighter than the dim streetlights that tried to challenge its truth. In the beat that followed, a cascade of clarity tumbled over the chaos. Laughter turned to disbelief, then to subdued awareness. Seconds, warped into eternity. And suddenly, the officer felt exposed, as if the world could see through the layers of armor he'd built up over years of chasing shadows, but now found he was the shadow being chased by truth. Echoes of past mistakes reverberated through him. Every badge, every name, every moment he once shrugged off became a weight pressing down on his chest. A truth unspoke but loudly heard. And then came the cuffs. Ironic solace in cold metal as judgment's weight pressed heavily on his wrists. "Justice waits, it never forgets," the black man whispered, his voice carrying an age-old promise. The burgeoning fate of change nestled within his resolute tone. After the storm, silence, pregnant with possibility. A promise carried on the whispered winds of a city that sighed and began to breathe again. The sudden descent into stillness was palpable, as if the world around had shifted into another realm entirely. Those who had gathered, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama, continued to hold their breath. The street appeared frozen in time, the noise of traffic a distant murmur, overtaken by the profound silence of the moment. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls like restless spirits seeking solace. Their eyes darted between the officer, now subdued by the weight of his own actions, and the man standing stoically before him. The crowd, a diverse tapestry of the city's racial and social collage, stood united in shared tension, a silent testimony to the iniquities played out on this stage, their faces a spectrum of shocked concern and quiet anger. Conversations lay forgotten in the still air, replaced by unspoken questions that lingered like ghosts. Small gestures became monumental, a glance, a furrowed brow, the click of a phone camera, all etched into the memory of the night. It became an unspoken pact among the onlookers, a shared understanding that these moments were not just to be seen, but to be remembered, replayed in the collective memory as a beacon for potential justice in a world all too familiar with its absence. In this arena of stillness, where every breath was measured, an elderly man stood at the periphery, his craggy hands resting on an ivory-tipped cane. His eyes were orbs of history, etched with lines of battles fought long before this night. He had seen this scene play out too many times before, though each one felt fresh with the pain of 1,000 slights. "Ah," he muttered softly, a whisper that stitched through the air like a needle through cloth. Change has a way of waiting till the last moment. Next to him, a young woman clenched her fists, her eyes bright with resolve. Her heart drummed a rhythm of resistance she had only read about in history books, the lessons passed down from parents who had to pull courage from the earth on which they stood. Her presence here, her very breath, a continuation of a legacy unwilling to be silenced. Children, too young to grasp the full weight of the moment, played nearby, their laughter incongruent with the gravity of the scene, but nonetheless a testament to life's persistence amid conflict. The innocence in their eyes was both a painful reminder of the ignorance begotten by youth and a hopeful promise of potential future free from the bonds of past prejudice. Time seemed inconsequential as the onlookers coexisted in a tapestry of silence woven with threads of hope, fear, and anticipation. And yet, in the heart of recounting this moment, the black man stood firm, anchoring them all to the reality of the present with a dignified posture and eyes that spoke quiet truths. The officer, now handcuffed, stood motionless, caught in the arresting reality of his circumstances. His laughter, once bold and careless, now served as little more than an echo, dissipating into the background noise of history, a history he had unwittingly perpetuated with his ignorance. The gears of understanding turned slowly within him, the paradigm he once believed breaking apart with each tick of the clock's hand. In the distance, the sound of approaching sirens joined the symphony of the still night, gradually growing in crescendo. These were not alarm bells, but harbingers of accountability, carrying with them an authority that went beyond the badge. They approached, bearing witness and potentially signaling the dawn of understanding, a harmonized response, beneath which lay the seeds of genuine change. The night stretched on, an open wound in the city's narrative, demanding attention, reflection, and eventually healing. Words seemed superfluous in the wake of such elemental silence, yet they hovered like thick smoke in the chilly night's air. The world, it seemed, was held in a tenuous balance, teetering between the pressures of negative history and the possibilities of an enlightened trajectory. Meanwhile, the digital sky of social feeds crackled with electricity, as those present migrated their witness accounts into the realm of the virtual, an indelible record of time and testament. Their actions, a nod to the power that lay in technology, would not let this story drift unanchored to truth. The truth wasn't just what was captured, it was also what lay unspoken as the city's collective soul stirred, and thus a quiet spark ignited. A shift, followed not only by those on the street, but, indeed, by all who would bear witness in the capture of a frame, sealing the night within their memory. The crowd, this mosaic of individuals whose paths converged, remained steadfast amid the unwritten lessons unfolding in real time. In the silence that followed, hope took its first tentative steps from the shadows, defiant against the backdrop of an unjust history. The silence itself was heavy with potential, charged with the electricity of possibility. The night, having listened closely to the whispers of those it sheltered, prepared to bestow the quiet each demanded, a sense of justice, yet fit only for those who pursue it with unyielding resolve. The static air hung heavy, pregnant with the echoes of unresolved tension. Among the crowd, the black man stood as an unwavering pillar, his gaze neither accusatory nor submissive, but filled with a deeper understanding, a wisdom quietly rippling beneath his steady exterior. His calmness was almost disconcerting to onlookers, who understood the gravity of such moments when the wrong move could mean everything. Yet he was like a guarded fortress, each breath affirming his inner strength, a strength drawn from an identity unacknowledged by those who so hastily judged him. His badge was more than just an emblem. It was a symbol of an untold story, of a life led under the radar of preconceived notions. It represented countless nights spent deciphering threats that loomed large and yet remained invisible to the untrained eye. The secrets of his service were a burden he bore alone, woven into the fabric of who he was and who he could be, to a world predisposed to assumptions. Beneath the ghostly hush of streetlights, his presence was a stark contrast to the disconcerted officer, now reduced to a mere participant in a scene he had unwittingly authored. The black man's resolve flowed through him like a silent symphony. It was a melody only the perceptive could hear, a tune of resilience sung by those who carried their truth quietly, defiantly. From behind the officer, tension crackled as if waiting for words to slice through it, yet the man maintained his silence, a calculated withholding that did not come from fear, but from awareness. He understood the power of biding one's time, the need to let the truth rise organically from the depths where assumptions often play. As the moonlight glinted off the shield in his hand, the story beneath its surface began to unfurl. Here stood not just a man in a standoff, but a covert sentinel of justice, the very notion the officer had sworn to uphold. This emblem, this badge, consequence of labor unrecognized by many, was both tool and testament, a silent testament to his unexamined chapters of courage. Thus he remained silent and steadfast, his actions conveying a narrative more potent than any words he could offer. His history, though unwritten in official records, was no less real. It spoke in whispers and shouts of moments when action trumped inaction, where his unyielding courage nudged countless situations back from the brink of disaster. In the concealed pockets of bureaucracy where he often operated, anonymity seemed a safe harbor from unwanted attention, yet on nights like these, it became a stark reminder of how invisibility could, sometimes, shroud the necessary reveal of one's identity. Unseen power compromised by skins assumed inadequate. The crowd, still poised on the precipice of action, observed this unspoken narrative with renewed understanding. The gravity of the situation settled around them like a dense fog. Yet clarity emerged in the figure standing resolute against unwarranted hostility. His calm invincibility inspired something latent within them all, a shared connection to their own capacities for unseen power. To the officer, handcuffed and reflective under the moon's waning light, the revelation was a slowly dawning sunrise, pushing back the shadows of ignorance that had guided his actions thus far. His past experiences now seemed hollow against the solidity of this moment, where assumptions and reality collided with a force that demanded acknowledgement beyond surface understanding. The man's silence spoke volumes, inviting introspection from those who dared to listen, who dared to see beyond the misleading veil of immediate appearances. It called upon them to engage with a deeper narrative, where justice did not cling to skin tones but resonated with the truth of action and honor. Cars hummed past, oblivious to the unfolding history etched upon the night, the city continuing its rhythm despite the rupture within its heart. Yet, those who stopped those who watched were changed. Their understanding of what was possible shifted by the quiet authority of the man amidst them. The crowd, a living paradox of community and individuality, bore witness to the unveiling of a truth not easily seen. Power often lived shrouded in quiet resilience. And so, the silent sentinel stood, his quiet defiance serving as a lighthouse to all those willing to watch the solitary yet potent source of clarity amidst the nuanced details of assumption and reality. The weight of his identity, his role, had become more than mere detail. It was now an irreversible testament to a vast landscape of hidden integrity, birthing the dawn of change in the hearts of all who would listen. The laughter that had once echoed so freely from the officer's lips now seemed hollow in retrospect, a brief moment of misguided triumph overshadowed by a profound realization of error. It was the kind of laugh that spoke not of humor but of ignorance, an insidious ripple across the night's tense canvas, its reverberations now lost in the gravity of newfound authority. Just moments ago, the officer had been the embodiment of unchecked authority, perceiving his position as unquestioned. In the stillness that followed, a stark transition took hold, a subtle acknowledgement of the depth of his misjudgment. His chuckles, meant to demean, had only served to underscore the chasm of misunderstanding that permeated their interaction. Now, handcuffed and quietly reflective against the backdrop of urban detachment, the officer's mind replayed the events that led him here, each step steeped in regret and disbelief. The black man stood unwavering, his stillness a profound statement against the assumption-laden actions of the officer. Restraint masked a lifetime of learned patience, a silent protest woven into every fiber of his being. His gaze, penetrating and steadfast, never wavered, a lighthouse in an ocean of bias and assumption. His strength, unrecognized until contradicted, the depths of ignorance, began to unfold like the petals of a flower unfurling at dawn. As the crowd began to murmur once more, a collective intake of realization seemed to fill the air, whispering truths long buried beneath the city's well-trodden streets. Here was a man who knew the strife beneath the surface, a wielder of authority whose credentials demanded respect, not because of a shiny badge, but because of the integrity with which he would wield. For the officer, what had once felt like an assured dominance now appeared senseless, his laughter a mere shadow of ignorance laid bare. Spectators stood witness not just to the unfolding action, but to a broader narrative that stretched far beyond this twilight corner of the city. The officer's laugh, once a deterring factor, now transformed. Its echo became a harsh reminder of the assumptions too commonly held by those in positions of power. It now served as a stark emblem of misstep rather than authority, dismantling the facade he had constructed around himself. Amidst this backdrop, the black man's unyielding persistence acted as a mirror to the officer's self-awareness. No longer could he shield himself beneath the badge alone, for the badge held no power when wielded without conscience or understanding. His racism, once a secret confidence, lay bare in the undeniable light of truth, and in that revelation lay the seeds of learning, should he choose to embrace them. The officer, bound by metal restraints and reflective silence, found himself on unfamiliar ground, a landscape as foreign as it was uncomfortable. Yet within that discomfort lay the potential for transformation, the realization that authority does not solely reside within a badge, but in the ethical way one chooses to act while wearing it. This truth hung heavy around him, each moment of silence loud with the possibilities of change. In the eyes of those who watched, there was more than judgment. There was an unspoken invitation for the officer to evolve, to understand that laughter and power must be wielded with a respect born from empathy rather than assumption. They were resolute in the belief that healing from such an indelible experience could initiate a rebirth not just for the officer but for all who would learn from this night. What began as an assumption-laden interaction had, in the prevailing winds of reflection, transformed into a dialogue of potential dialogue, free from words, but full of silent recognitions. In the chaotic aftermath of that one chilling laugh, now lingered possibilities: awakening for the officer, redemption within reach, should he decide to accept the challenge with courage. Beneath the quiet exchange of glances, the hum of distant sirens filled the night, drawing nearer, each wail a testament to the inevitable accountability now woven into this night's narrative. In the officer's pause for introspection lay the beginnings of ripples, revelations, stretching beyond the immediate, echoes of justice waiting to be heard loud and clear, inspiring those around to hold tightly to a hope for change. And so, the unknown path stretched before him, a journey he would embark upon not through laughter but through understanding. Change was no longer an abstract concept, but a tangible landscape he had stumbled upon. Compelled by the stark fallout of his own assumptions, the crowd, a living testament to the truths revealed that night, watched with cautious hope as the first light of transformation began to glimmer faintly in the eyes of a man who found himself shackled not just by metal, but by his own conceited misconceptions. In the charged silence that followed, the black man stood firmly rooted, the gravity of the situation held in the quiet power of his stance. Behind his calm demeanor lay a potent truth, a narrative itching to break free from the confines of assumption. His badge, now visible in the glow of streetlights, was more than a detail, it was a revelation, an emblem of his true identity that disrupted the preconceived notions cast upon his skin. The crowd leaned in, every eye fixed on this pivotal moment when masks dropped and reality shimmered seductively in the night air. The badge gleamed, its intricate engravings reflecting the light like a beacon of truth cutting through generations of bias. Yet, it was more than an ornate piece of metal. It was a testament to an unseen authority he wielded, both as protector and as a bearer of silent strength. He knew what he represented, understood the weight of the credentials he carried. This wasn't merely about proving the ignorance of one unruly officer, but about affirming his rightful place in a world that so easily forgot the breadth of his abilities. The emblem, marked with the esteemed insignia of the United States Secret Service, forced reality upon those who dared to dismiss who he was and the value of his contribution. The officer, his cuffed hands falling limply by his sides, finally witnessed the profound truth of the revelation, and in that moment he faltered. The laughter that initially masked his ignorance had dissipated, replaced by a sobering realization. He was no longer an imposing figure with authority omnipresent, but a man grappling with his own faulty perceptions. His demeanor shifted minutely, the seeds of understanding rooting themselves in the furrows of his mind. It was as if, in a single breath, he found himself standing on unstable ground, each assumption he'd once held creating tremors in the foundation of his judgment. Those gathered around could sense the shift in his posture, submission to an indisputable truth that encircled him like fate, unraveling its neglected threads. The man with the newly revealed badge was no longer the subject of scrutiny. He became the author of justice, a role he had practiced against invisible adversaries countless times over. His positioning changed everything. The scene on the street now called into question the constructs that had brought them all here. He addressed the officer not with anger, but with a voice edged in the calm clarity of one who understood power beyond the confines of ego. "This badge," he said, holding it gently aloft, is not just metal, but a reminder that you never really know who stands before you until you truly see them. The punchline was delivered not with humor, but with profound resonance, a short declaration that rippled through the ranks of the onlookers like the aftershock of truth revealed. It reverberated in their hearts, the simplicity of the message compelling in an era of complexity and misunderstanding. In that moment, the man's identity was not just unhidden, but celebrated. A silent accolade from a public who bore witness to the nuances and complexities of such an exchange. They now understood the man wasn't merely demanding respect for himself, but embodying the respect deserved by all those unrecognized in their heroism. The officer's eyes reflected a newfound depth of perception, wrestling with the consequences of his unwarranted bias. A cascade of internal echoes battled within him, resonating against each preconceived notion, now unraveling under scrutiny. He realized then that authority needed reminding, checks, and balances even within its own ranks, and this night would serve as an indelible reminder of that truth. As the weight of awareness settled over the scene, the crowd felt a release, an unwinding of tension that seemed to relieve the city itself. Witnessing the moment of the officer's realization was a shared epiphany, each individual tethered to the potential for change that could grow from this uncomfortable, imperative truth. The night sky bore witness to this transformation, an eye in the cosmos, marking the shift from an era of assumptions towards one where identity bloomed under the light of recognition, growth, and respect. The badge was not just the conclusion of one confrontation, but the commencement of change, a harbinger of justice retold in a story carried by the evening breeze, weaving its way into the soul of the night. In the softening dusk, the dialogue did not end. It continued, unspoken between each pair of eyes, awaiting justice's next cue, each heartbeat. A testament to the silent resolve it carried forward, a truth that could now sit, unburdened by the weight of obscured identities and obscured strength. The city hummed with echoes of memory, a complicated tapestry of history woven into its very fibers. In the midst of this street-side drama, latent inequities, long buried in the folds of societal evolution, stirred awake. Within every brick, cobblestone, and shadowed alley, whispers of the past lingered, reminders of strides made and of justice often deferred. It was in this moment that the scene unfolded yet again, not as an isolated incident, but as a reenactment of a deeper systemic story. The black man who stood at the center of this moment on the street was not just confronting the immediate world around him, he was facing the presence of history, an ever-lurking companion, a heavy shadow cast in the golden glow of streetlights. His silence was not acquiescence, but a dignified response born from generations of similar encounters. His calm, a turbulent sea contained within a solitary form. Flashbacks danced like ghosts across his mind, images of his ancestors, their expressions resolute even amidst unfathomable hardship. Stories shared around family tables, replayed in his thoughts, of doors barred closed by prejudice, of walls impermeable to the aspirations of an ambitious soul. His father's voice, rich and deep, resonated softly within him now, a reminder of quiet resistance passed down like an heirloom. "Always remember," he had said, "justice doesn't come wrapped in expectation. It builds with patience." Around him the air was charged with ancestral presence. The street, a living relic of countless marches and movements, groaned under the weight of recollection, a reminder of scenes both small and seismic that had chipped away at the facade of fairness to eventually draw forth progress. These scenes, mirrored now, whispered across time, a script written in the echoes of silent injustices. Every onlooker, each a thread in a larger tapestry, felt the weight of these histories, each moment forging their stance. For the elders among them, the scene dredged memories both vivid and painful. It was a replay of battles fought and won, and those still simmering beneath the surface, their stakes redefined countless times over generations. Youngsters, too, felt an unfamiliar tug. their modern lives intersecting with the past, reframing their understanding of a struggle as old as the city itself. Even the children, playing innocuously close by, soaked in the gravity of the exchange, perhaps not understanding the particulars, but feeling the undercurrents of a history that would one day become their own. The officer, bound in silence by his own startling revelations, was yet another actor drawn into this historical narrative. He stood, more reflective now, bound by cuffs but also by the invisible ties of decades-old misconceptions inherited without contest. Each handshake, each call, each action echoed with the choices made by those who came before him. Tales of law upheld and distorted by those entrusted with its weight. Evolutions of past behaviors played on loop in his mind now. 1,000 moments where his assumptions directed justice away from its target, mitigating action through the lens of ignorance. The realization wrapped itself like steel bands around his consciousness, prompting the contemplative journey he now faced, a journey of understanding that would not be complete without grappling with this systemic legacy. The crowd felt the shift. This transition spawning a dialogue not confined to words, but present in gestures and shared glances. It was palpable, this knowing awareness they shared, a collective recognition of journeys traversed and junctions reached. Many bore witness with bruised hearts, not just to the immediate, but to the continuance of historic struggle striving for a crescendo in visibility and humanity. His eyes, unwavering and clear, spoke of internalized strength, a determination molded by the fires of those who walked before him. The badge he bore was not just a sign of his current station, but also an unofficial emblem of every relative and ally who had waded through injustice to claim their right to stand tall. Through this prism of experience, the black man standing there, a silent sentinel, transcended the current moment. It was clear he was not alone. He carried with him an array of voices, a chorus of strength and resistance, whispering encouragement, shaping the night with their fierce, undying resilience. Each patient breath he took became a tidal force against the all-too-familiar whispers of inequality surrounding him. And so the shadows of history watched over the street that night, hints of memory dancing in the air. The truth of the past demanded recognition, its influence undeniable as it brushed against the skin of everyone present. With every wordless exchange, every silent promise of change, the narrative forged itself out of dormant traditions, alive again for those willing to listen, as the weight of stories yet unwritten beckoned to be recorded in their hearts. Beneath the fluorescent glow of the streetlights, the power dynamics at play slowly began to shift. What started as a one-sided confrontation had morphed into a tableau that questioned the very nature of authority and identity, unraveling the threads of assumption and laying bare the unvarnished truth. The air crackled with anticipation, each eye in the crowd darting between the figures at the center of attention, witnessing the brewing tide of a narrative in flux. The black man's calm demeanor was not simply a still presence, but a fulcrum on which the evening balanced, quietly challenging the constructs around him. His silence communicated what words could not, a powerful rebuttal to the age-old axioms of judgment and prejudice. In holding his ground, he introduced into the charged atmosphere a complex equation that demanded reconciliation. There was an undeniable aura surrounding him now, something almost tangible that seemed to absorb and then reflect back every ounce of prejudice being projected onto him. This wasn't just a question of a badge or identity. It was a confrontation with the broader premises of power, the structural hierarchies that sought to define one's worth through the narrow lens of skin color and uniform ornamentation. The officer, still securely cuffed, appeared diminished against the backdrop of the newfound understanding. His world, once defined by rigid lines and simplistic power structures, now felt abstract and elusive. The authority he had wielded so freely was called into question, not just by the man he had confronted, but by the eyes of every witness present. His gaze flickered to those around him, seeking something he was not sure he would find. An absolution, perhaps, or at least a glimpse of empathy to guide him through his self-imposed purgatory. He was beginning to realize that power, stripped of understanding and empathy, was cold and isolating. Authority, he found, should not be a unilateral imposition, but a mutual recognition of humanity. The black man stood silently as an emblem of resilience, a guardian of justice undeterred by the shallow barriers of misunderstanding often placed before him. His badge was more than metal. It was a reminder of an unbroken chain of human dignity that demanded acknowledgement. Not through coercion, but through inherent strength. The crowd sensed the crumbling of old powers, and with it, the germination of something potentially transformative. Conversations that had once been casual, easy exchanges, now gave way to discussions tinged with urgency and anticipation. Realization settled into the air between them. Something immovable and immutable. A soft rustle moved through the assembly. Some stepped forward, nearer to the scene, drawn by the magnetic pull of change. Young hands reached for others, connections forming across generational divides as the scenario unfolded in real time. A living lesson in civil authority, unresolved tension, and depth of identity. At the center of the crowd, beneath the steady gaze of those who yearned for righteousness, the officer's partner stood his own foundations, rocking beneath the revelation that had emerged. Seeing the dynamics of the confrontation shift, he viewed the authority they once wielded with new eyes opened by the clarity of undeniable truths. His partner's plight mirrored shadows from his own history, fragments of encounters whispered about but never truly examined. He stood, wondering not just about his place in this particular moment, but of the broader context his role demanded, across circumstances unacknowledged and buried in nearby. A young woman in the crowd whispered to her companion, the weight of realization dawning upon both. "It's not just about seeing," she said, her voice carrying authority beyond her years. "It's about understanding." Her words floated through the collective consciousness, echoing across minds eager for change. The officer, wrestling with the metaphorical chains of his past actions, let each second seep into the marrow of his introspection. He had long been a guardian of the status quo, but now his mind embraced the possibility of becoming a participant in its evolution. The black man's identity had been a catalyst, a mirror reflecting a world too eager to categorize without contemplation. Each heartbeat seemed to crash against the well-worn banks of tradition, forcing new channels through the rigid constraints of convention. The onlookers found themselves part of an unfolding narrative, one in which they, too, played a role beyond that of passive observers, engaging with the kinetic energy that surged through the air. The night held its breath, caught between conclusions and new beginnings, as justice peeled back the layers of societal norms one moment at a time. Here, in the quietude, the unbalanced scales hinted at equilibrium, and history whispered its lessons of patience and persistence through the gentle rustle of wind among the leaves. Amidst the shifting layers of power, the man's steady resolve remained a beacon, his quiet strength asserting its own kind of authority. It was a strength recognized not through intimidation, but through the shared humanity that lay at the heart of justice. And in this silent discourse, the city watched, its breath held, waiting for the tide to turn. The murmured conversations from the crowd blended into a low hum, a new kind of energy crackling through the air, a collective consciousness forming, compelled by the gravity of what they witnessed. Bystanders, phones in hand, captured it all through their lenses, the quiet whir of technology punctuating the twilight. These devices became sentinels, unyielding as they chronicled the action, freezing moments in time that might otherwise be forgotten or dismissed as abstract injustice. The gathering of spectators, a microcosm of the city's diversity, stood as silent witnesses. Each recorded clip, each photo snapped, carried with it the power to transform perception, amplify voices long muted by the din of systemic bias. It was both a simple act and a profound declaration: to observe, to record, to ensure this story found its way to the surface in the ocean of narratives that clamor for space in the digital world. The black man at the center of it all remained a steadfast symbol of the strength found in quiet resilience. Though he stood alone, every click and flash around him fortified his presence, turning a moment of potential vulnerability into a tapestry of empowerment woven by the people who watched, recorded, and waited. Fear and anger coalesced into resolve, a shared determination that surged from device to device like wildfire, the flames of awareness catching hold. Within this collective action lay a silent oath, an understanding among the crowd that these moments, caught in pixels and bits of data, were more than just proof of injustice. They were a call to understanding, a plea for empathy and humanity to guide the winds of change. The crowd understood the legacy they were part of, each individual playing their part in weaving the fabric of a more just society. The officer, handcuffed and pondering the revelations of his unconscious prejudice, felt this new scrutiny penetrating his armor. It was no longer about the here and now on this dim-lit street, but about the scrutiny that would follow, fueled by the resonance of each recorded frame. His world, once comfortably insulated by the power he wielded, was now vast and chaotic, each digital eye a reminder that anonymity was no longer afforded to those who choose ignorance over empathy. Somewhere in the crowd, an activist known for her vocal presence took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the unfolding scene. As the cameras rolled, she knew her place was not merely to record, but to channel the captured moments into actionable momentum. She viewed each shared image as a catalyst, its impact magnified by shared outrage and intent. "We will be heard," she whispered, her voice a promise carried by the murmurs around her as she tapped into the solidarity cementing in shared resolve. Nearby, a father held his young son's hand, explaining in hushed tones the importance of standing up, of witnessing, of being present, even in seemingly inconsequential moments. "This," he said gently, "is why we watch, so we can tell the truth of what happens here, and by telling it, change it." His words, quiet and profound, wove themselves into the narrative, each one a stitch binding the community together, inspiring them to hold the line against the churning tide of complacency and bias. As the digital trail grew richer in content, the truth became more tangible, not just an ephemeral concept, but a concrete narrative shaping the thoughts and actions of those present. The crowd understood the weight of this digital permanence. It was a double-edged sword, cutting through lies, uncovering the core of systemic imbalance while also inviting critique that demanded integrity and readiness to inspire change. The black man remained a figure of patient strength amid the chaos of revelation and recording. With the city as his silent ally, he allowed the weight of the situation to rest upon his shoulders, shoulders forged through years of quiet endurance. His story, no longer silent, now resonated far beyond the confines of this moment, each captured image a testament to his journey and the journeys of those before him. And so, each recorded moment blended into a symphony of electronic solidarity, a blend of shared experiences and shared hopes. Those armed with cameras were not just bystanders but active participants, weaving their way into the very fabric of history with each click, ensuring that silence could no longer be used as a weapon against the voices of truth. The night drew on, its inky expanse punctuated by the flash of cameras and the unwavering resolve of a community bonded by shared vision. In this standstill, where silence mingled with action, the city breathed deeply, its heartbeats syncing with those of its citizens as they waited, patiently, for justice to weave its final narrative. As the street settled into the rhythm of tension and anticipation, the city around them pulsed with a life of its own. The distant hum of traffic wove a low melody beneath the night air, punctuated by the restless shuffles of bystanders adjusting their stance, their collective breath mingling with the cool evening breeze. It was as if the very heartbeat of the city was synced with the spectacle before them, each thrum a testament to its inhabitants' shared history and aspiration. The city whispered its secrets through the rustle of leaves and the murmur of distant conversations carried on the wind, a living entity that held within itself countless stories of resistance, progress and regression. This was a place where pavement carried the weight of 100 marches, where every lamppost bore witness to dreams deferred and desires realized under the cloak of stars. The black man, still rooted in quiet resilience, seemed to draw strength from the city itself. He was one with its pulse, his stature and silent resistance bathed in the same moonlight that had witnessed the city's joys and sorrows. His calm facade was contrasted by the urgent energy of a metropolis always on the brink of the next march, the next challenge, the next moment that might tip the scales just a fraction more towards justice. In this boundless arena of urban life, those gathered formed a microcosm of the city's essence, a complex web of backgrounds and experiences that unified in these potent moments of tension. The narrative unfolding was more than a clash of individuals. It was a reflection of the city's ongoing battle with its own identity, a tug-of-war between progress and deep-seated biases. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, the sudden sound echoing off the brick facades, a reminder that life continued to hum along its well-worn paths even as change beckoned on the horizon. Some in the crowd shuffled their feet, their restlessness mirrored by the discontent that pulsed through every artery of the city's vast network. The officer, lost in his own contemplations, felt as if the city itself was judging him. He sensed the weight of its eyes, its stories and failed reckonings bearing down upon him, each unanswered call for justice resounding through the city's veins. The crowd's silence functioned as a mirror to his conscience, reflecting back the silent screams of every unnoticed or discounted moment of humanity bypassed by uniformed authority. From within the crowd, a street musician strummed a poignant tune on a battered guitar. The melody wove itself through the air, infusing the night with its haunting beauty. It carried an unspoken commentary, a wordless reminder of the city's propensity to envelop even conflict within the warmth of shared moments. Children, sensing the gravity without knowing the specifics, clung to parents' legs, their eyes wide with the kind of understanding that exists beneath language, a knowing imprinted in the soul rather than explained. They were the future inhabitants of this city, the ones who would inherit its triumphs and its struggles, its hope and its hard-won lessons. A mother held her child close, her gaze fixed upon the scene before her, each heartbeat an echo of protectiveness and hope. She leaned down, whispering softly, "Watch and learn, my love. This is how change begins." Her words became part of the living narrative of the moment, a reminder that every individual carried the potential to be a catalyst for justice and equality. The black man sensed this shift, a current beneath the surface, an acknowledgement of shared experience reverberating like the toll of a distant bell. As much as he stood alone in his immediate resolution, he was wrapped in the fabric of those who stood with him, an intricate weave of intentions and dreams held together by more than just proximity. In the distance, the whoop of another siren added its voice to the urban symphony, a deep, sonorous call that seemed to both challenge and respect the gathering's resolve. The promise of reinforcement resonated with complexity. Freedom waited with the pall of repetition and the specter of history repeating itself. Yet, within this tapestry of night, each individual was reminded of their role in stitching together the narrative. The city exhaled, and its inhabitants followed suit, their collective breath a shared expression of determination and hope that refused to be dimmed by the shadows of iniquity. At this nexus, where individual stories intersected with the broader narrative of a city in flux, they all watched as the night reached for dawn, waiting for the edges of darkness to pull back and reveal the true colors that lay beneath. And the heartbeat of the city, ever resilient, persisted, a steadfast testament to its enduring spirit, ever hopeful for the change that would guide it through another day. As the vibrations of the city hummed softly around them, a new force started to gather at the periphery. A line of squad cars glided into view, their sirens hushed but lights still flashing, a silent approach that belied the authority they represented. Members of the police force emerged, their presence a mix of curiosity and duty, drawn to the unusual congregation that had sparked both questions and silent protests echoing through the evening air. The arrival of additional officers introduced fresh variables into the dynamic. a mingling of uncertainty and anticipation. Their presence was neither menacing nor entirely welcome. It was a necessity born out of protocol, yet an intrusion that reminded all present of the layers of authority permeating the moment. The black man, unyielding in his steadfast resolve, became the focal point of this new assemblage, a calm nucleus around which the chaotic interplay of emotion and order revolved. His serene demeanor did not falter, communicating quietly yet effectively to those in uniform that their arrival, while expected, held no sway over his quiet confidence. As they took their positions, sweeping analytical glances across the scene, the officers could sense the shift in air, a palpable tension coupled with a resilient energy that seemed to draw strength from the weight of countless eyes watching. Contained within their role was a responsibility for resolution, yet their minds were alert to the delicate nature of unfolding human narratives. Among the newcomers, a lieutenant with years etched into the lines of his face moved forward, aware of the complexity the scene presented. His eyes flickered with understanding born of experience, recognizing that this was not simply an issue of law enforcement, it was a layered confluence of humanity, expectation, and the deep-seated need for resolution beyond the badge. The lieutenant paused, taking in the man standing firm beneath the scrutinizing gaze of law and citizenry alike. There was a silent acknowledgement, the kind that required no words, behooved those who understood the unspoken truths of their respective roles. Here was a man surrounded not just by people, but by ideals, unspoken and enduring. From behind the ranks of officers, the officer who had instigated the incident remained, cuffed, hands bound as much by his actions as by the tangible restraints. His stance was less defiant, more contemplative, wrestling with the burden of his realization as he observed the delicate balance between his personal fallibility and the collective authority of the colleagues who had arrived. The crowd, now fortified by the renewed presence of law enforcement, maintained their vigilance. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as if the threads binding them together were tightening, a unanimous silent command that this oversight would not fade unexamined into the color palette of the night. A nearby officer, younger and more visibly wary, caught sight of the badge of the black man, a revelation stark in its simplicity, yet powerfully profound in context. In that brief exchange, something shifted within him, an understanding beyond the purview of his current experience, but resonating with the omnipresent memory of what prejudice had stolen from the narrative of justice over the decades. The lieutenant, upon recognizing what others yet grasped in full measure, stepped forward to address the black man, his voice carrying the weight not just of command, but of something approaching humility. "We are here," he began, words measured, "to ensure that justice, in its many forms, finds space tonight." The statement, though simple, carried a resonance that rippled through the crowd, echoing within those who understood the potency of true justice, not merely written but practiced. His eyes remained fixed on the badge, acknowledging the depth of error in the unfolding of events thus far. With the authority of recognition, the lieutenant gestured to an officer stationed nearby. Swift, decisive movements followed as the key to the officer's handcuffs materialized. The lock turned with a soft click that resonated through the silence. The younger officer hesitated momentarily, aware of the implications, aware of the public eye scrutinizing every move. The officer, now unshackled, was not free of the lessons learned, yet liberation from his cuffs marked a moment of reflective departure, a dissolution not just of physical restraint, but of an outlook that needed reshaping. He stood, no longer merely a participant but an observer of his own reformed perspective. With newfound clarity, the officers repositioned themselves to contain not only the physical borders of the scene, but the larger narrative that would continue to ripple outward, challenging structures older than the foundations the city stood upon. Each officer, conscious of the scrutiny, became part of an unscripted ballet seeking equilibrium between authority and empowerment. The city, draped in the enduring silence of night, felt the subtle shift a step closer to reconciling its own dualities, a breath caught between the present moment and the generational echo of those before who had dared to dream of change. The balance, ever delicate, tipped slightly towards understanding and redemption. In the hush that followed, as authority acknowledged its capacity to listen rather than dictate, the city embraced its citizens, the heartbeat of the metropolis echoing the smallest trill of potential triumph over the shadows of injustice, striving always to find the light. The digital realm, much like the street, was alive with activity, a web of interconnected narratives spun from countless perspectives, as if guided by invisible threads. Each piece created a larger mosaic of recorded truth. Social media platforms buzzed with real-time updates, the promise of viral spread enticing and inevitable. This was no longer just an event confined to physical space. It was now a narrative playing out on screens around the world, crossing boundaries both geographical and ideological. The instant judgment rendered by the eyes of the internet was swift and unyielding. Comments poured in from across the spectrum, some empathetic, others ignorant, yet all were held together by the desire to weigh in on a story that symbolized so much more than its immediate players. The unfolding drama demanded attention and dialogue, sparking debates vibrant with opinion and occasional vitriol. The heart of the city, as seen through its digital reflection, pulsed with every new piece of information uploaded, a video clip from a nearby phone, a tweeted thread dissecting the implications, an image freeze-framed in clarity. Each added fuel to an already intense discourse surrounding the complexities of identity, power, and prejudice. It was a collective consciousness, the digital ether vibrating with the shared knowledge that something significant was unraveling. Weaving through this fabric of digital noise was a thread of solidarity, a recognition of shared narratives and the empathy that came with it. It was here, in the virtual alleyways, that deeper conversations flourished, challenging assumptions and shining a light on experiences often marginalized. These exchanges were no less genuine for being conducted at the speed of light, resonating with the histories and futures of those engaged. Amidst the swell of voices, the black man's presence became a symbol, a focal point that transcended momentary conflict and served as a catalyst for broader dialogue. His identity, once overlooked, became the nucleus around which many stories orbited, each angle lending depth to the discourse. This wasn't just about one man's encounter. It was the tip of an iceberg, revealing the submerged truths of systemic injustices. Back on the street, the officer, freed from physical restraints yet bound by the awareness they'd brought, watched helplessly as his uniform became emblematic of a struggle much larger than himself. He too was now a character in this broader narrative, subject to the digital eye and its unflinching judgment. Scrolling through the flurry of alerts flashing across their phones, onlookers became participants in the story's exponential reach. Each shared image or retweet carried a piece of their experience into the wider world, sharing pain and awareness, frustration and desire for justice. In their hands, these devices weren't just cameras or keyboards, but vessels for truth, pledging countless narratives to the digital tapestry. Somewhere in the midst of this virtual tumult, a reporter crafted a story that would weave the disparate elements of this evening into a cohesive tale. With keystrokes that mirrored the urgency of the moment, they attempted to imbue each word with the weight of reality and reflection. Every fact checked, each quote aligned, reflected a commitment to integrity, hoping to guide readers beyond the surface drama to the deeper truths. Yet, even as these stories proliferated online, the city itself held its breath, an involuntary pause as it awaited the ripple effects of a world now keenly aware of its flaws and potential. That pause was palpable on the street, a tension between the enclosing shadows and the shards of light breaking through in each act of witnessing. Voices, both dissonant and harmonious, filled the ether, creating a symphony of hope, dissent, and reflection, a discordance that underscored the complexity of the human condition. For each expression of outrage was countered by a call for understanding. Every dismissive comment met with the counterweight of empathy demanding to be heard. From the center of this burgeoning narrative, the man who had inspired such a wave of attention stood firm, his silence no less impactful in the vibrant, chaotic conversation swirling around him. His presence was a reminder, a beacon urging the world not to look away, to dwell just a little longer in the discomfort necessary for progress to unfold. And so, the city remained, suspended in a digital purgatory of reflection and reckoning. Each pixel, each byte of data, was a prayer for change made material. Through these electric veins flowed the lifeblood of modern protest, the silent roar of millions demanding that a moment of injustice become a monument for progress. The digital heartbeat, echoing the pulse of the city, refused to fade, ensuring that the lessons of the night might yet guide the dawn of a more equitable era. The black man, standing resolute in the dim light, was more than simply a figure at the center of chaos. He was a sentinel of justice, an embodiment of roles he had played quietly yet powerfully throughout his life. Behind the unassuming facade lay a deep connection to activism and advocacy, roles that had shaped him not just as an individual, but as part of a broader movement. In the silent moments following the chaos, his thoughts wandered not to the night's distress, but to the long-standing battles waged in rooms far from public scrutiny. His badge did not define him, nor did his role, but rather the principles he upheld in every encounter. Behind the marble walls of power, within hidden corridors of influence, he had fought tirelessly before tonight, to shift dialogues toward a more just future. His presence on that street, seemingly just another man in another encounter, belied the weight of his contributions. Each stride in those polished shoes had traversed the halls of Congress, whispered truth to those often deafened by privilege, carrying messages from communities far removed from the seats of power, but never far from his heart. The gathering crowd unknowingly shared space with a man who routinely whispered into the ear of justice, nudging it towards change. His was the voice behind closed doors that roared with the silent might of generations, carrying forward demands for equity, rights, and recognition hammered out on street corners much like this one. Even now, his thoughts drifted to meetings yet to come, ideas that needed shaping, the next step in a journey toward systemic justice. Each quiet utterance in those spaces held a potency far beyond his presence, seeking to dismantle long-standing barriers with calm insistence. The officer whose assumptions had sparked the chain of events remained unaware of who truly stood before him. To him, the man was an enigma, an embarrassing fluke in a night's ordinary patrol. Yet, as the realization slowly seeped into the crevices of his understanding, he began to sense that the visitor was more than just the bearer of a badge. Each interaction the man had with people ranging from the disenfranchised to those in power had prepared him for moments like this. His experience was a quilt sewn from patches of activism and service, his knowledge a sword against the ignorance and prejudice that pervaded his everyday encounters. Among the crowd, whispers began to circulate, captivating attention as the role of the man at the center of the storm began to be pieced together, the stories of his quiet activism bubbling up through channels of shared experience, like streams merging in a riverbed of collective consciousness. There was something fundamentally grounding in knowing that justice had representatives like him, a mosaic of courage and quiet dignity that pursued change not just when it was demanded by the roar of protests, but also through the intricate whisper of policy and reform. His life was a testament to the fact that true power was not wielded loudly or with force, but with insight and persistence. He'd always known that roles of influence were to be worn lightly, existing in service to the people and ideals far greater than the individual. Through the cards of policy, law, and reform he'd played deftly, becoming as much a part of the system as he was a challenger to it. The crowd sighed collectively, an exhalation of understanding, each person unknowingly taking part in history as they comprehended more of the man's narrative. The officer, too, found himself at the crux of understanding, his paradigms shifting in light of this newfound knowledge. As these realizations unfolded, potential paths for dialogue opened, veins to new possibilities carved into the mind of every onlooker. Those gathered knew now they weren't just witnessing a confrontation, but the intricate dance of identity and power, unmasked, exposed for all to see in its rawest form. Peering across the faces filed before him and those filing away in memories safely protected by their digital counterparts, the black man saw not just bystanders, but allies. Each held within them the intimations of change, kernels of action that, with growth and nurturing, could force the slow wheels of justice to turn that little bit faster. The city, and its witnesses, keenly aware of what had transpired both in the open and the silent corridors of influence, now found themselves illuminated by the potential of the night. The quiet reassurances ignited by their presence, sustained by the knowledge that justice had, that night, claimed its voice, and more importantly, its listener. And the world, watching in silence through screens and stories, began reconnecting, the quiet flicker of hope igniting as a first light began to glow on the horizon of reform. In the soft embrace of the night, a subtle shift emanated from the crowd, weaving through the ranks like a whispered secret finally allowed to breathe. The layers of misunderstanding and prejudice began peeling away, revealing a lighter atmosphere charged with the electricity of newfound comprehension. The young officer, standing beside the lieutenant, felt this shift acutely. He was at a crossroads, one where the past collided with the stark revelations of a present demanding accountability. In his mind, clarity dawned slowly, like the rising sun over a misty cityscape, a realization that demanded more than just acknowledgement but action, change. He turned to observe the man who had been the epicenter of the night's events. Struck by how assured the man remained amidst the chaos, there was a certain grace in how the black man carried himself, an aura that resonated with purpose rather than power, a figure unarmed in any conventional sense but more authoritative than any badge could ever bestow. Nearby, the lieutenant stepped forward, his presence a grounding force that demanded respect through quiet confidence rather than rank. This, too, was a moment of reckoning for him, a chance to exercise his duty to uphold not just the letter, but the spirit of the law. He met the black man's gaze, and in that instant, realization matured into something palpable, understanding that this was not a simple matter of enforcement, but one of enlightenment. The crowd, sensing this evolution, leaned in, metaphorically and physically, eager to witness the unspoken acknowledgement that lingered between the law and those it served. Collective breaths were held, anticipation spilling over into the silence, each heartbeat synchronized to the rhythm of an overdue clarity. "Sir," the lieutenant began, choosing his words with deliberate care, "we are aware now, perhaps for the first time truly, of the magnitude of our assumptions tonight." His voice flowed through the night like a balm, each word an offering, a gesture of reconciliation that reverberated far beyond the moment. The black man inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement evident in his eyes, a tacit acceptance that went beyond surface-level reconciliation into deeper waters where real change could begin to stir the depths. In this exchange, a bond was forming, tenuous but true, a bridge built on mutual respect rising from the misunderstanding. The young officer observed, captivated by the interplay of authority and humility, and felt the invisible shackles of his own perceptions loosen. This was his moment to embrace the truth unfurling in his midst, a chance to transcend the prejudices inherited and cultivated, to step into a role that championed understanding above authoritarianism. With newfound resolve, he moved closer to his colleague bound by earlier actions. "We have our lessons tonight," he murmured, voice too low to carry beyond their immediate sphere, but resonating profoundly in its truth. "Time to understand what standing for integrity really means." Throughout the crowd, there was a sense of movement, a shift in energy as these moments reverberated. Each individual became an essential part of a broader narrative, one where they not only witnessed change, but carried the seeds of it forward into lives beyond this intersection of past and present. The journalist in the crowd scribbled frantically, seeking to capture the essence of this story, not just in facts, but in the emotional truths that had unfolded. Here was a tale yearning to be told, one that delved beneath the surface to explore the deeper complexities of justice and human connection, of identity and transformation. The black man, though anchored in the present, felt the tendrils of future conversations weaving through his thoughts, a tapestry yet to be fully realized but rich with potential. He gazed at the faces around him, each lit with an understanding that the way forward was collective, the paths to justice manifold and interwoven with the fabric of their shared humanity. And in that moment, realization dawned across the collective conscience, a recognition that individual actions ripple outward, affecting the larger sea of society. That change, when nurtured by understanding, blooms not instantaneously but steadily, each petal a testament to the dawn of reform. The night's embrace held them all, and the city, its buildings kissing the edges of the sky, hummed in quiet acknowledgment of what had shifted within its heart. Amidst the shadows, the first rays of a new understanding began illuminating the street, casting long but hopeful shadows that promised a dawn colored not by the hue of their skin, but by the depth of their shared journey towards justice. As the city held its breath under the sprawling night sky, the moments ticked on, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths now coming to the surface. A circle of thought and reflection began to draw in the key participants. It was time for dialogues deeper than protocol, time for words shaped from the raw material of introspection. The lieutenant, couched by years of service and wisdom earned in silence, watched the faces of his colleagues and the man who had inspired this upheaval. There was strength in acknowledging failure, and he understood the courage it took to face such an unsettling truth. He gathered his thoughts, preparing to bridge the gap between perception and reality with conversations that demanded vulnerability, yet offered redemption. Stepping forward from the peripheral murmur of onlookers, the black man's voice finally broke the quiet, deep and resonant. "What unfolds here," he began, voice strong yet measured, "is far more than an isolated incident. It's a reflection of biases unchecked, assumptions nurtured without challenge. Our world, gentlemen," he said, meeting their eyes in turn, "deserves better than a perpetual fear fueled by ignorance." Around him, an almost tangible sense of agreement settled, many nodding silently in accord with his message. Here was a man who'd found the strength to not merely point out wrongs, but to guide them through a corrective lens. It was unfamiliar territory for most, but overdue and necessary. The younger officer, still grappling with his own transformation, found his voice next. "I see the mistakes we've made," he admitted quietly, words almost lost to the breeze, "and I see the path we must walk, together, if we're willing." His humility spoke volumes beyond rank, offering an olive branch of sincerity he hoped could counterbalance the judgments his actions had sparked. The words hung in the air, delicate tendrils of possibility when balanced against the cruelty of past negligence. They each painted a picture of introspection that slowly took shape in the minds of those present, one that longed for action beyond mere acknowledgement. The lieutenant, charged with the moment, nodded in respect towards the black man. His voice, though carrying authority, resonated with an understanding rooted in these realizations. "Our badges were meant to serve the people," he said, a declaration and a reminder. "We carry the weight of law, but we must also carry the compassion of humanity." The black man received this admission with a nod, recognizing the sincerity in it. He was not here to condemn but to educate. He was a reluctant teacher in a system that too often ignored the lessons it desperately needed to learn. For the officer whose actions had defiantly lit this spark, each word was part of an echo chamber of self-inquiry. Who was he beyond the badge? Could he redefine his role, not as enforcer, but as guardian, ally, advocate? These were his questions, hanging unanswered, yet they began to shape a mission he had never previously considered part of his duty. Across the street, the crowd absorbed the momentum of this dialogue, filtering it through the prism of their experiences. Many of them hoped that from this discourse could rise an awakening more profound than any policy, more enduring than speeches or text. A transformation woven into the everyday actions of every person tasked with guiding society toward justice. In the silence following these revelations, the night fell gently around them, blanketing the city in cautious optimism. The dialogue, while unfinished, laid the groundwork for relationships forged out of respect, understanding, and a collective desire for change. Above, the sky began to surrender to the softest hint of dawn, light threatening to break through the nocturnal shroud. It was a herald not just for a new day, but for renewed commitment, a promise that the long night of societal oversight could, perhaps, give way to clearer, brighter, and more equitable future. In that promising light, the discussions continued, no longer a confrontation, but a conversation, one bound to change those involved if they allowed it, mark them with new perspectives. This was not just a resolution, but an evolution, led by voices once silent, but now thundering with the authority of truth allowed to resound across the cityscape. The rippling effect of understanding, spawned that night, would dare to cross far beyond the alleys and streets, rippling through precincts, echoing in policy rooms, spinning its web across communities built on the shoulders of those ready to listen, ready to act, ready to embrace the shared light of justice. The dim glow of the approaching dawn lent a quiet clarity to the faces gathered, each individual part of a tableau that would resonate beyond this intersection. Among them, the officer who had initiated the night's events stood, his internal landscape forever altered by the shifting tide of perception and realization. His partner, observing the night's implications unfold, began comprehending the full weight of their actions in a way diagrams and lessons had never quite. He was an observer in this narrative, yet deeply intertwined with all that transpired. For him, shadows of doubt had long been buried beneath procedure and expectation, but now they re-emerged, stark and undeniable. The process of questioning long-held beliefs and the roles they assumed was a formidable path, challenging, yet necessary, and he felt its stirrings insistently nudging his conscience. The black man, emblematic of the unheralded wisdom among them, continued to stand as a testament to resilience, his silence as impactful as his words. He occupied this moment not simply as a participant in justice, but as a visionary. In his stillness lingered the potent presence of thousands who had walked to foment change, who also had demanded recognition through empathy. For the officer's partner, whose worldview had been shaken by the raw truth of misjudgment laid bare, this moment was pivotal, a passageway through which his understanding could emerge reborn, purified of prejudice's taint. His silence was not of complicity, but of introspection, a retreat into the personal recesses where the mind weighed its evidence against emerging understandings. Transformation danced on the periphery of his thoughts, challenging whether his role was simply to uphold the law or if it extended further into the murky realms of advocacy and allyship. Could he reconcile the figures of authority he belonged to with the deeper obligation to ensure justice was equitable and infallibly blind to bias? He watched, absorbing the intersection's heartbeat, the collective breath, as individuals reconciled their understandings of power with the ethics that must guide its wielding. Conversely, in acknowledging the mistakes made, he recognized a burgeoning desire to educate himself, to listen beyond his conditioned responses. This internal dialogue held the seeds of both vulnerability and growth, pivotal to progressing his role as a carrier of justice. Onlookers, observing the quiet unraveling of biases and the dawning light of understanding, became acutely aware of their own biases. Conversations sparked among them, tentative but necessary dialogues designed to ensure that what unfolded before them did not simply fade with the morning light. They became participant witnesses, ones who could take the lessons forward into their own lives, weaving justice into the broader social fabric. And around them, the atmosphere hung with unvoiced commitment. They'd given witness not just to a man's acknowledgement of his identity, but to the collective realization of an immutable truth born from a long night's journey toward understanding. Humanity's task wasn't merely to uphold laws, but to reconstruct them, where they no longer served the collective well-being. His partner's understanding deepened into resolve, born not from doctrine but from humanity, unsend understanding that drew strength from the titular roles each carried into their interactions. By accepting the invitation of growth inherent in mistakes, his compass now would turn toward guiding those beneath him, preventing them from succumbing to the same pitfalls woven into systemic injustices. Amid this sea of transformation, the city became both witness and participant, cradling the exchanges within its historic veins and preparing to add this narrative to the mosaic of its experience. As night surrendered its grip, washing the cityscape in the hope of a new day, there was a shared belief in potential twinning inside the spaces each participant held for change. The hours passed in deep connection, a continuum of hushed understanding broken only occasionally by the anticipatory thrill of embracing tomorrow's promise. Together, but separately, they all pledged to not just acknowledge the night's lessons, but to carry them forward, determined to echo their impact as actions unfolded beyond words. The officer's partner, and all who had dared to see beyond the surface, conceded. The core role of any figure wielding authority was not rooted in dictating, but in bearing witness with humility and grace, ensuring justice was served not on a platter of privilege, but one molded by accountability and respect. As the first rays of a forgiving dawn kissed the city awake, it was with renewed hope, bound by a shared memory and cognizance that the journey before them was vast but not solitary. For justice, once revealed, never truly returned to shadow. It yearned for the perpetual light of day, driven by humanity's ceaseless impulse to grow beyond its own conceits, molded by a collective yearning to first understand, then transcend. The new day smiled gently, bathing all beneath its light in the warmth of possibility, inviting them to embrace the journey toward a more just tomorrow. As the dawn began to unfurl its gentle tendrils across the cityscape, a new silence fell over the gathered crowd, deeper and more introspective than before. It was a silence pregnant with meaning, echoing with possibilities that had only just begun to reveal themselves in the wake of the night's events. This silence was a blank canvas, inviting thoughts and feelings to emerge, unfiltered and unguarded. The black man stood amidst this quiet transformation, a figure of significance not because of the badge he bore, but because of the quiet dignity he carried. Around him, the bystanders were absorbing the gravity of what had transpired, each moment of confrontation now sediment settling at the bottom of a clear lake, crystallizing understanding out of confusion. Yet there was an unspoken barrier still lingering in the air, a hushed complexity that accompanied the aftermath of confrontation. This was the silence where words were insufficient, where the truth needed to marinate in the shared experience before clarity could emerge. Within this silence, equilibrium was being sought, a balance between acknowledgement and the thirst for redemption. The officer's partner felt the weight of this silence, a palpable reminder of the vast ocean of unspoken words yet to be navigated. He grasped the enormity of the task before him, recognizing that each pause in speech was an invitation to reflect on his own role within the broader tapestry of justice and his newfound sense of responsibility. Could he, and those around him, overcome this quiet barrier that seemed so insulating and yet inviting at the same time? The black man, aware of these lingering silences, recognized their power, not just as an end to the night's events, but as a beginning. Silence could bridge divides as much as words could, if allowed the space to be heard, to resonate with meaning. His gaze met the officer's, and he offered a slight nod, a gesture that conveyed the complexity of forgiveness and expectation without a single word exchanged. Nearby, a woman with a journalist's notebook tucked under her arm moved between the still figures, her pen poised but hesitating. She too was wrestling with the weight of the unspoken and grasped at the nuances that could not be easily captured in ink. But she knew, as did they all, that this silence was the secret to real understanding, a vital part of the narrative that would linger long after words had faded. Differing reactions spread through the crowd, some awash in guilt, others in the relief of newfound awareness, but they shared a commitment, an unyielding dedication to communicate beyond initial perceptions, beyond assumptions formed in the echo chambers of prejudice. Out of the deepening shadows, A whisper of movement, children, oblivious to their roles as witnesses to this transformative evening, began to stir. Their laughter tentative but unconcerned with subtext. They were the embodiment of the future, untouched by assumptions, whose understanding of justice callously founded by the voices around them, further bolstering their honest, instinctual interpretations. The morning light glinted softly off the badge cradled in the black man's hands, a symbol that had been hidden in the din of mere appearances, now resplendent in the light of a clear day. It served as a reminder to everyone present that justice and dignity were not the provenance of authority alone, but the responsibility of all. In the stillness of that morning, those gathered realized they were participants in a dialogue not yet completed, an unfinished cadences of progress that demanded perseverance beyond the pause. The challenge was to hold that silence close, allow it to anchor them, and then use it as a springboard to fill the void with understanding and action. For the officer's partner, the path was clear. Silence had silenced him before, but no longer. It was time to speak, to transform reflection into action, to cross the invisible boundary erected by his consciousness and emerge as a different, more equitable hand of the law. And so, the assembly, a chorus of shared intent, began to disperse, each participant carrying the seed of transformation into their community. The silence, having provided its lesson, released them back into the flow of the city's life, now marked by silent resolve and the whispered promises of change. The city, embracing this new dawn, inhaled deeply, breathing in the potential of transformation born from the weight of history and hope. The barriers of silence had been traversed, the air now humming with the subtle promise that once the teachable silence had been embraced, a fuller voice would rise to shape the day. And within the quietude, where night had met morning, stood a community, not just healed, but strengthened, capable of ensuring that the echoes of their silence traveled far and wide, empowering them to speak their truths when the time was right. The city exhaled, steadfast in its commitment to the journey of transformation, whispering, "We must listen to advance." As the sun began to stretch its warm fingers across the skyline, the quiet spell of dawn broke, and with it the voices of the crowd began to rise, replacing silence with vibrant discourse. The stillness that had draped over the street was now abuzz with an awakened energy, ignited by the realizations born from the night. The heart of the crowd was pulsating with a mixture of emotions, frustration, mingled with the promise of change, anger coalescing with hope. Each individual, now participants in a shared struggle for equity, began to find their voice as one among many in a shared crescendo demanding recognition and transformation. A woman stepped forward, her eyes bright with determination and the burden of narrative long silenced. Her voice, though measured, was powerful as it cut through the murmur of resolution, carrying with it the story of communities long undersold, but rich with resolve. "No more," she declared, the words simple yet loaded with the weight of unwavering commitment. This proclamation served as a rallying cry, electrifying the air as more voices joined, weaving a tapestry of mixed tones and cadences. Yet together they formed a harmonious echo that demanded accountability, promised defiance against complacency. They were no longer solitary figures on the sidelines, but were now a chorus, one soul with shared goals reverberating through alleys and avenues. The black man, unexpected conductor of this gathering symphony, watched as the energy of the assembly climbed towards the crescendo. His silence had never been one of helplessness, but of measured influence, an understanding of when to hold back and when to release the message for maximum impact. This authority of silence now gave way to voices he had inspired to join in unity. He watched as these voices shaped their truths into calls for action, each a part of a chorus that aspired to take its place in the annals of change. Here was a gathering ready to hold power to account, to ensure that what had transpired would not fade into the recesses of memory, but serve as an enduring impulse for equity. Around him, every face reflected the complexity of the human experience, a living tapestry that found strength not in uniformity, but in diversity. Young faces, buoyed by optimism yet heavy with the understanding now etched into their consciousness, gazed upon their elders with respect, ready to inherit the baton of justice. In the mid-morning light, a collective urgency pulsed through the throng, a clarion call for structures to be reforged, policies to be scrutinized. For this crowd, empowered through shared experience, wanted not only acknowledgement of past transgressions but reform that proceeded beyond promises into tangible outcomes. The lieutenant, standing in this sea of awakened awareness, turned to face the brewing tide of change. He understood now that his role, his choice, was pivotal. He could be an ally, a bridge that helped navigate the waters of reform. His nods of agreement sent ripples of encouragement through those around him, a silent commitment to steward the shifting paradigms inside him and without. The officer's partner, too, felt the gravitational pull of the call to courage. His resolve, newly birthed in the crucible of reflection, began to crystallize into a determination whose roots fed on understanding, with the nourishment of compassion ready to grow anew. His voice, tentative yet certain, joined the chorus, a subtle promise to foster strength from disassembly of previous misconception. Their voices converged, challenging the silence of antiquated justice to rise to the rhythms of progress, a communal heartbeat that refused to be stifled or ignored. The crowd understood instinctively that their voices, once freed from silence, belonged not just in that moment, but would echo across generations as a testament to their night's vigil. In this concert of calls and responses, the city itself seemed to sway, drawn deftly by the rhythm of unity. Shadows that had loomed large throughout the night receded, dissolved by an unwavering belief in the power and clarity of their combined voice. As the sun's ascent continued, the conversations turned forward, propelled by a desire to transcend beyond reaction to enact the kernels of change they held tightly, planted securely in the fertile grounds of shared struggle. And so, their voices rose, renewed by the birth of a new day, a day that promised more action, more change, more justice than the night had ever offered. They resolved that their chants would grow, thrive, and travel, never bound by borders, forever magnifying through the halls of justice, transforming silence to dialogue, inaction to empowerment. On this morning, the city buzzed with determination and the unwavering rhythm of progress, a promise born of unity, and the fire of shared adversity. As these voices lifted, they began weaving a future where justice rang loud and clear, echoing the truth that change was not to be silenced but embraced, nurtured until it flourished through every street, every heart under this shared sun. As the echoes of raised voices reverberated through the city streets, a new energy palpably infused the crowd, transforming the street corner into an impromptu forum of passion and purpose. Just as electricity surged through the power lines above, a current of anticipation threaded its way through the people gathered below. The day, now fully awake, seemed charged with potential. Emerging from this convergence was a group of legal advocates, individuals drawn to the scene by the pulsating rhythm of social media alerts and word-of-mouth urgency. They maneuvered through the crowd with purposeful strides, briefcases in hand, symbols of a system often viewed as indomitable yet essential to navigate for change. These legal representatives, diverse in their backgrounds yet united in their mission, approached the center where the black man stood, their presence a tangible commitment to transforming dialogue into action. Here was the scaffold upon which they intended to build bridges over divides that had long separated intentions from outcomes. The crowd took notice, their voices momentarily softening, giving space to the representatives as they reached the epicenter of this movement, a convergence of spontaneous activism and structured advocacy. The conversation had now taken a turn toward the tangible infrastructure needed to sustain newfound momentum. At the heart of it, the black man welcomed these allies with gratitude, recognizing them as vital architects in the transformation of energy into enduring impact. His gaze, steady and resolute, contained all the gratitude of someone who could see the nascent beginnings of actualized change within their arrival. The head of the legal delegation, a woman whose eyes brimmed with determination, extended her hand to him, a gesture steeped in mutual respect and shared understanding. "We stand with you," she declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to navigating systems meant to both protect and corrode integrity. "Our commitment doesn't end at the observation, it begins with concerted effort." Her words acted as a bridge, connecting the passion of the collective with the machinery of the legal system designed to effectuate change from within. It was the realization of the sometimes painful truth that legality must be as much a tool of liberation as it has been historically one of omission. The lieutenant, now an active ally in this unfolding tapestry of action, stepped forward, adding his voice to the chorus of proactive resolve. "Our precinct is committed to transformation," he stated earnestly. "We are ready to partner with this community and these advocates. Let's ensure that the words spoken today become the actions of tomorrow." His pledge sent ripples of cautious optimism through the crowd, a whisper that perhaps, this time, promises might grow into pathways for sustainable change. Legal representatives and community leaders began to talk in earnest, their discussions cutting through the crisp morning air with promises of strategy meetings, advocacy campaigns, leveraging media platforms to amplify voices, and the ceaseless pursuit of equitable justice reform. Each commitment was a seed planted in the fertile grounds of solidarity, intent on yielding a harvest of justice that the city and its people craved. The young officer, having wrestled through the night with personal transformation, found himself engaging tentatively but sincerely in the discussions, eager to absorb the lessons that could inform his future actions. A quiet resolve that burned beneath eyes newly opened to the scope of his responsibility. In this fertile discourse, the city's usual morning sounds, the honk of taxis, the clatter of train tracks, the murmur of thousands going about their lives, served as a soundtrack, underscoring the determination alive within this gathering. Here, shadows of doubt had given way to dialogues of inclusion, a weaving of hope from threads of justice well overdue. The black man, watching these dialogues thrive in the sunlight, understood that this was but the beginning. Each day moving forward would demand vigilance and action, collaboration and sacrifice, to ensure the moment did not stagnate into unfulfilled potential. His presence, both a beacon and a steward, embraced the role of guiding this transformation from spontaneous uprising to lasting change. And with that understanding, the crowd, swelling with purpose, began to disperse into the fabric of the city, holding with them the fire of resolve that had ignited under the canvas of pre-dawn sky. Their voices, intertwined with legal acumen and community support, promised to echo beyond these streets, piercing through the barriers of complacency and reinvigorating the pursuit of justice. The city itself, having borne witness to this confluence of outrage and promise, exhaled in tacit approval. The day, no longer an innocent bystander, now bore upon its shoulders the weight of accountability and hope. It was a new promise, wrought from the night's reflection, a solemn vow that justice was not merely desired, but was becoming realized, one street corner, one conversation at a time. As the sun climbed higher, so too did the aspirations of those committed to shaping a just future, bathed in the light of shared humanity and collective resilience. Under the golden glow of the rising sun, a hush enveloped the street, as if the world was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The gatherings, the speeches, the resolutions, they had all been pieces of a larger puzzle, inching closer towards an inevitable climax. This was a moment on the cusp of transformation. Within the crowd, eyes began to focus on movement at the center, where the black man stood with the newfound alliance of legal advocates and community leaders around him. It was clear that something significant was about to unfold, a testament to the night's burgeoning potential. The energy, crackling like electricity, pulled every soul into its orbit. Kindling the flicker of expectation from the knot of advocates, a figure stepped forward. A man holding in his hands documents, tangible evidence of written truths seldom spoken yet undeniably powerful. He was a legal advisor, known for his relentless pursuit of justice through the intricacies of law, his every action informed by decades of advocacy carved out of systemic friction. The crowd hushed to a quiet murmur as he raised his voice, imbued with the solemn weight of unfolding history. "Today," he began, drawing in the collective gaze, "we're taking a step beyond the conversation. We're pushing the boundaries that have long constrained us, laying a foundation for a future made equitable by design, not accident." With a deliberate motion, he unfurled the documents, a petition, forceful yet elegant in its intent. It was a comprehensive proposal for reform, the result of committed work by those who refused to let justice remain an abstract idea. "We're calling for accountability," he continued, "and policy that reflects the diverse voices of this community, a blueprint for real change." The words hung in the air, their potential boundless. This was the turning point, the revelation that movements could be catalyzed into legislation, spoken dreams captured on paper, destined for halls where change was mandated and required. A quiet thrill rippled through the crowd, a realization that here was a moment where aspirations met scaffolding, where vision met the tools to construct new paradigms. The black man, standing beside this blossoming initiative, felt a swell within him. His journey, marked by silent strength and patient advocacy, was weaving its way into the wider narrative, a thread of lived experience becoming a banner for those battles long fought in silence. His eyes, reflecting the fervor surrounding this tangible promise, gleamed with the tears of quiet triumph. The lieutenant, who had embraced the night's epiphanies alongside citizens, understood the magnitude of this document, its power to unsettle and recalibrate. Beside him, the younger officer, transformed by the deep stirrings of introspection, saw within these pages a map not just for community, but for personal redemption, for forging a path he had hesitated to tread until now. As the legal advisor outlined the proposal, its tenets sowing the richness of equity in every line sexable representation, mandatory bias training, community oversight, the crowd swayed with the rhythm of affirmation, their voices murmuring in agreement, swelling with hope that such articulated commitment could indeed uproot injustice from its corrosive seat. Against this backdrop of legislative promise, a reporter raised their camera, capturing the scene not as mere documentation, but as an emblem of ascending purpose, a testament that change was not only imminent but actively unfolding. The images, framed by the lens, promised inspiration and a beacon for all who would rally behind these foundational steps set forth. In this moment of clarity, the city and its people merged into an unbreakable entity, a microcosm of what could be achieved when voices were not only heard but amplified. It was a vision propelled by justice, sustained by community, initialized by a dawn revealing more than sunlight. It was illuminating paths long obscured by shadows. This proposal, now a centerpiece of their rallying, represented more than advocacy. It was a proclamation that change could be manifested here and now, written into the fabric of city life, ensuring its principles echo through the ages. It was a defining movement, ushered in by a persistent, collective demand that justice become an unyielding foundation, not an elusive prospect. And so, as signatures were gathered, as commitments solidified, the city drew its next breath in harmony with those ready to carry the mantle onward. It was a breath full of potential and possibility, drawn in deeply by each individual who watched, hoped, and knew that they were part of something larger than themselves, an enduring reform built on the efforts of many and the courage of each. The radiant light of the morning sky embraced them all, sealing the day's promise in its warm embrace, no longer confined to aspirations but cemented in the undeniable, tangible blueprint for a tomorrow shaped by justice, delivered by perseverance. In the heart of the city, clarity bloomed, and with it, a turning point that refused to fade, the blueprint of change forever sketched across its bones, promising a dawn colored by progress and unity. As the sun's light bathed the city in a warm glow, the scene on the street shimmered with a sense of new beginnings. Yet, amid this optimism, the officer who had been handcuffed earlier stood off to the side, wrestling with the maelstrom of emotions churning inside him. He watched the interactions occurring with a growing sense of displacement and reflection, his role in the night's events casting a long shadow over the newfound light. In the silence of his thoughts, his uniform felt like a heavy shroud, a symbol of authority that had been questioned and found wanting in the face of truth. The realization of the harm his actions had caused weighed him down, his mind replaying the confrontation that had unfolded before him, a moment that now served as a catalyst for an irreconcilable internal shift. Around him, the crowd, empowered by the potential etched onto the pages of proposed reform, bubbled with enthusiasm and determination. The contrast between his inner turmoil and their outward jubilation was stark, and for a moment he found solace in their voices, hopeful sounds that pierced the silence of his reflection, calling him to rise above his errors and embrace the potential for change. His partner, sensing the internal struggle, approached quietly, offering a presence devoid of judgment but rich with mutual understanding. They stood side by side, akin to two pillars amidst the ebb and flow of humanity, anchored in the shared knowledge that transformation would not come easily, but that it must come. Every mistake, his partner began without preamble, his voice calm and measured, is a chance to learn, a chance to do better. It was a simple truth, resonating in the quiet space between them, underscoring the accountability that now intertwined their shared experience. The words lingered, settling into the officer's consciousness where doubt and hope wrestled for dominance. He knew the path to redemption, to personal and collective transformation, required more than just acknowledgement. It demanded action, commitment, and humility born from understanding. As he stood, gazing at the throngs of people filled with unyielding resolve, he realized that his journey, much like theirs, was only beginning. Here was an opportunity to reshape his contribution to the badge he wore, to embody the principles it was meant to represent, not through authority alone, but through service rooted in empathy and equity. The black man, engaged in dialogue with the legal advocates, caught his gaze momentarily, their eyes meeting across the crowd. What passed between them was an unspoken acknowledgement, a tentative bridge of shared humanity, understanding the intricate dance between fallibility and resilience. This fleeting exchange was enough to stir within the officer a decision, cementing a resolve that had only been an ember in the depths of his uncertainty. He knew now that his future lay in being an active participant in the unfolding narrative, not just as an observer, but as a catalyst for justice and healing. Redemption is not a destination, he reminded himself, but a journey we make with each choice at a time. Determined to put this revelation into action, the officer turned towards the lieutenant, whose own journey of understanding had begun to deepen with the events of the night. The lieutenant, already a figure of authority reshaped by the promise of reform, stood poised to mentor and guide. Their conversation unfolded with earnest sincerity. Commitments murmured amid the ambient clamor of community engagement around them. Plans for training, discussions on empathy-driven law enforcement, initiatives to bridge divides between public servants and the populace. They were threads of intention woven into a dialogue that promised to shape a more equitable law enforcement ethos. As the community mill about them witnessed the stirrings of aligned intent, it became evident that this moment was not just a turning point for a few, but for the entire fabric of their shared existence. Here was an effective narrative rewritten by those who dared to listen, to reflect, and to evolve within the space where justice and redemption intersect. The morning sun, casting long shadows that grew shorter as the day progressed, was a silent witness to the insights exchanged, the promises made, and the bonds strengthened. With each passing moment, the officer's heart lifted from its burden, filled now with the quiet power of resolve and the promise of renewal. For in this rising tide of change, where doubt had once nestled, there was now the clarity of purpose, an understanding that he, just like the city around him, could rise anew, reflecting the light of justice not alone, but as part of a collective mission for truth, equality, and restoration. As the city's rhythm picked up, buoyed by the crowd's spirit, he stepped forward into the embrace of possibility, determined to be part of the chorus that proclaimed, "Together we rebuild." Within the swirling currents of reform and reflection, the officer, still grappling with the weight of his realizations, found himself amidst a sea of relentless activity. The voices of the crowd, once distant murmurings, now threaded through his consciousness with potent clarity. Each shared story of injustice and determination to forge a path to redemption echoed in his mind, an anthem for change that lingered with each step he took away from the immediate scene of conflict. His partner, walking alongside him, sensed the gravity of the officer's silence, but also the tremors of transformation rumbling beneath his quiet exterior. They moved together in thoughtful synchronicity through the dispersing crowd toward the precinct, where the familiarity of their roles awaited an evolution long overdue. Yet, redemption is a complex journey, laden with mistrust and understanding, intertwined with the frailty of human error and the resilience of growth. As they returned to their ops, the precinct, its walls echoing with the echoes of countless chapters of policing history, seemed to loom before them, at once both a home and a crucible for change. Within this fortress of law enforcement, the officer knew he would face not just the external challenges of rebuilding trust, but the internal struggles of reshaping his identity as a public servant amidst peers with varying perspectives on justice. Forgiveness, if possible, was a path, yet as uncertain as the dawn it hoped to bring. Despite the burdens of skepticism, the officer resolved to approach this journey toward redemption with measured certainty. He would not be content with simply returning to the status quo. A revelation far too profound had shattered that facade. His steps needed to be deliberate, rooted in the twin pillars of accountability and empathy. But forgiveness from those who had witnessed his misjudgment was another churning tide he would need to try navigating. Though hearts achingly open to possibility held space for empathy, one cannot demand amnesty where wounds were fresh. Forgiveness, like justice, was not an entitlement but a process, an unfolding dialogue requiring time and unwavering commitment. Stepping into the precinct's somber halls was both a return to routine and the beginning of a different cadence altogether. He sensed the eyes of colleagues upon him, some curious, others reserved, many sharing the same internal debate spurred by the officer's very public failures. Inside, familiar seats and corridors greeted him, unchanged by the tumult outside, yet charged now with the potential for introspection. The internal rumbling of machinery through the building mirrored the quiet resolve taking root in his visit. The precinct was ripe for a different kind of quiet revolution, with the support of those willing to open discussions, those tasked, like him, to mend the rift between knowledge and perception. He and his partner outlined a plan. This wouldn't be just their personal journey. It would be an initiative bolstered by collaboration with community advocates and legal minds already primed for involvement. Through those first meetings, filled with hesitant yet hopeful discourse, the officer began to glimpse a path toward genuine understanding. There would be workshops centered around empathy and awareness, a rethinking of procedure infused with community insight, and a platform for voices outside their sphere to educate and enlighten. For the officer, the challenge lay not just in embracing this training himself, but in galvanizing others toward the same determination to facilitate healing through understanding. He sought mentors in the advocates he once viewed with cautious respect, now embracing their insights with the humility of one born anew from the ashes of ignorance. In the days that followed, the rhythm of their work and interactions seemed to shift, slightly at first but unmistakably, to reflect the evolving ethos of service they pledged to embody. These moments of promise stretched like beams of light, breaking through uncertainty's cluttered horizons. Alongside him, his partner helped navigate the uncharted waters, steering clear of performative acts and instead seeking genuine connections with the communities they served. They understood now that transformation was not about ticking boxes, but about authentically bridging chasms of understanding with every call, every arrest, and every interaction rooted in respect. The road towards forgiveness, he learned, was not a destination reached alone, nor was it one paved without doubt or struggle. It required acknowledgement of past missteps, the integrity to effect change, and the commitment to continuous growth, a gift solemnly earned rather than easily granted. Outside, the city thrived in its newfound tenor of hope, not merely skimming the surface of reform, but digging deeper to ensure that every lesson learned echoed in policy, practice, and perspective. And in this reimagined cadence of service, drawn from the well of human experience, the officer and his precinct stepped forward. Each step a promise to do better, each interaction an opportunity to begin anew. Together, they heeded the city's call, inspired by the irrefutable truth that in acknowledging and embracing one's imperfections, they could weave a narrative not of retreat but of resilient renewal, a chapter where justice was not a deferred dream but a lived reality for all. As days turned to weeks, the city settled into a new rhythm, its pulse now guided by the initiatives sparked on that pivotal morning. At the precinct, a quiet revolution was underway, cultivating change not through sweeping gestures but through considered, deliberate actions. Seeds of transformation, planted amid confrontation, patiently nurtured this novel roots of change. The office walls of the precinct, once sterile and shadowed by tradition, now hosted lively discussions echoing the fervent beats of a community eager for reform. Eager voices filled these rooms with authenticity and the kind of dialogue that reached beyond superficial engagements. Areas that bore witness to countless faces passing through were now spaces of engagement and learning, infused with a spirit of collaboration sparked that groundbreaking day. Policing, for those committed to its evolution, began to take on a new edifice, reshaped to reflect the principles of understanding and empathy. It demanded vulnerability, shedding masks of authority and embracing a dialogue that dared to ask how service could evolve. Conversations threaded through every level, drawing in captains and rookies alike, each aware of history's shadow stretching behind them, still unresolved yet illuminated by the promises ahead. As part of this transformation, the precinct opened its doors wider to the community, inviting voices that demanded acknowledging those often unheard in rhetoric, but pivotal for authentic reform. Workshops took seed, built on joint consultations with legal advocates who understood the painful intricacies of the law and its impact on daily lives. Sessions focused on navigating bias, implicit and explicit, introducing narratives once ignored, now recognized as indispensable. Among these sessions stood the officer who had stumbled into this crucible of change. His journey far from over, but now buoyed by purpose. His partner remained beside him at the transformative helm, both fueled by the inexhaustible drive of allies within and beyond their realm. Their resolve drew strength from those advocates who had dared challenge the status quo, weaving their stories into actionable insights. No longer did the officer's gaze avert out of complacency. Rather, it held with it the clarity brought on by accountability shared, no longer shunned. It was not guilt that drove him forward, but the call to action, the calls from this mosaic of lives and voices calling for justice. Beyond precinct walls, the community witnessed these changes unfolded, skeptical yet hopeful, watchful eyes observing each step with cautious optimism. The efforts didn't go unnoticed. Captured through informal gatherings and earnest conversations at cafes, places of worship, and neighborhood meetups. Silence, once a hidden burden, dissolved, exposing the palatable vibrato of restorative focus. It was in these moments, rich with potential, that initiatives began to take shape. Programs aimed at dismantling barriers between police and the communities they served sprouted, an exchange of vulnerabilities that appeared both synergetic and healing. Initiatives like ride-alongs restored transparency. Officers invited community members to journey along need-to-heal paths, each connecting through recounting personal narratives, inclusive of lives deeply marked by justice. and dreams still tender. Local schools became enlivened with officers volunteering their time to mentor, listening to young voices with ears intent on understanding, not dictating. These interactions were bridges to trust overdue, stretched over an expanse filled with fears too eager to hide beneath defensive facades. In the world outside, news of their efforts sparked an energy that reverberated far and wide. This movement catalyzed ideas beyond city borders, tales of a precinct finding its humanity, daring to question its principles, to birth a culture committed not just to enforcing the law, but ensuring it served the people equitably. The initiative extended beyond events. It was woven into every meeting, reflected in rigorous review processes and policies honed through collaboration. As reforms took root, policies shaped not by fear of reprisal but by shared visions of fairness became a new doctrine. In the precinct's corridors, conversations organically continued, sometimes between shifts or in moments of shared laughter, a testament to how deeply this collective reckoning had embedded into their daily life. Officers who hesitated now stepped forward, bolstered by the security that stemmed not from force but camaraderie forged through purpose and shared accountability. This rhythm of change reached upstream, touching those in legislative spheres, infusing elected officials with ideas and resolutions drawn from grassroots input. Opinions once buried steamrolled into actionable policy drafts. What had begun during heated exchanges on the streets of a guarded city now wound its way through institutional frameworks, challenging indifference and apathy. As time carried these actions forward, the city found itself renewing beneath the weight of change, its very air charged with possibilities bolder than expectation. Shared memories of injustice, now intertwined with tangible reform, coalesced into a forward movement. From whispers on street corners to proclamations in councils, to votes that fostered influential practices meant to ensure justice, Navy sails beyond. And so, harnessing the light of understanding that transcended those uncertain nights, the precinct and city moved together, dim boundaries dissolving, shadows shrinking as collective effort allowed progress to thrive. The community, strengthened by their past, fused with the reform of the present, constructing resilient hope, built on truths unspoken for too long. With every meeting and handshake, every story and idea shared openly, this evolving polity moved toward a horizon infused with unity and empowerment, its voice richer, more resonant each day, like steady drums on the city's heart, echoing the pledge to keep striving together, for change not just born from necessity, but embraced by will, joined anew. The city's heartbeat, now pulsing with renewed vigor, resonated within every corner of the community. Conversations that began with raw tension had blossomed into meaningful exchanges, knitting together a tapestry of change. A quiet revolution feared stagnant no longer. As day met day, the collective resolve of the community began to crystallize into tangible demands for accountability and transformation. In neighborhoods once shadowed by neglect, groups began to gather, drawn together by the momentum of progress. These gatherings, varied and vibrant, took place in community centers, local cafes, and open parks, where voices rose not just in protest but in hope and constructive ambition. A new sense of possibility lingered in the air, an unspoken promise from one to another that the path forward remained steadfast. The black man who had catalyzed this movement found himself more integrated within these circles, not as an outsider but as a revered member. His presence brought with it the authority of experience and the quiet strength of one who had long practiced the art of resilience. Each encounter gifted mutual inspiration, hushed exhortations to continue pushing against the complacency that had once lulled the city into ignoring its own potential. Against this backdrop, the community's diversity was its greatest asset. Young and old, parents and children each resonated with the shared understanding that their narratives, once fragmented, had found unification in this collective experience. Together with city officials committed to change, they aimed to reshape the societal structures that had defined them, to better reflect their complex identities and dreams. These meetings, infused with determination, served as crucibles for ideas, where policy shapers listened to community voices, weaving insights into potential reforms. Youths voiced their visions for education reform, small business owners highlighted the necessity for economic empowerment, and residents from varied backgrounds co-created frameworks to enhance public safety and repair fractured trust. Buoyed by the blend of innovation and insight mimicked by the grassroots, the City Council found itself on fertile ground, ready to receive these conversations. The growing grassroots revolution resonated as an undeniable call to action, an opportunity to embrace reform and existence, not mere forethought or past echoes now heard, but a dawning song from renewal, built on collective resolve. At the heart of these initiatives lay the precinct that had initially sparked the movement. Its transformation from within had become a beacon, inviting officers from other districts to observe, learn, and replicate. This precinct, once hardened by systemic tradition, now pulsed with inclusivity, a living testament that reform was possible when approached with sincerity and open-hearted collaboration. Leaders within the precinct mobilized dialogue sessions with civilians, breaking down barriers that had once seemed impenetrable. By allowing the community to guide and inform the police's efforts, they co-constructed programs that addressed root issues rather than symptoms efforts, focused on mentorship, restorative justice, and youth engagement. In such forums, attendees shared their lived experiences, crafting narratives that drew on challenges and triumphs alike. The discussions were candid, raw, and occasionally uncomfortable, but this very discomfort propelled them forward, inspired by the ability to deconstruct biases and rebuild understanding brick by brick, one interaction at a time. For the officer struggling to correct his past, each dialogue offered layers of empathy and awareness formerly uncharted. He witnessed the barriers between badge and community dissolve beneath a culture of discourse and shared accountability. His story, once one of resistance and guilt, now evolved into a narrative of redemption, authored collaboratively with those he once distanced himself from. And so, the city found itself teeming with initiatives and dreams, molded by collective ambition. Spaces that had once been silent now buzzed with workshops on conflict resolution, civic engagement, and historical awareness. Political rallies gave way to community events that embodied the strength and promise of unity. The impact rippled beyond the participants, seeping into the cracks of everyday life, creating seismic shifts in how people viewed themselves and the systems they interacted with. Policies, once introspective and distant, began aligning with the needs and realities of those they were designed to serve, drawing on stories that reached across time and identity. As the days wove into the weeks and then months, what had once been a city fragmented by misunderstanding found new coherence in the shared undertaking of change. Each individual felt the weight of accountability rest upon their shoulders, a summons to continuous vigilance, so that the aspirations born from shared resolve wouldn't dim. Guided by the rhythms of conversation and cooperation, this city stood resilient, bolstered by the myriad voices that defined its core. It was unity not forged by uniformity, but by a richer understanding infused with empathy and a commitment to equality. Here stood a testament, a city no longer tethered to the shadows of its past, but propelled by the luminous potential of an embraced, equitable future, echoing a chorus of renewal heard not only in its streets, but also in the hearts of those who sang it boldly forward. Each note an affirmation. Change, arduous yet inescapably within reach, would remain their harmonious refuge as long as voices persisted and dreams took flight. The rhythmic hum of progress now resonated through the city's veins as the months advanced, each day weaving new threads into the fabric of reform that had been so painstakingly initiated. Amongst the bricks and mortar, amidst the intangible currents of change, the city's evolution unfolded like a vast, living tapestry. It was an intricate dance, where history met hopes realized, where passion was turned into palpable action. Within the precinct that had served as a crucible for this transformation, officers found themselves part of an ongoing dialogue with the communities they served. This dialogue was fueled by mutual respect and the understanding that authority and empathy could coexist without diminishing each other. What began as tentative steps had matured into a predictable rhythm of collaboration and growth, paving pathways once thought impassable. Amid this evolution, the officer who had ignited the initial storm continued his journey of redemption. No longer shackling himself to the ghosts of past mistakes, he embraced each day with renewed purpose, a purpose molded by the hands of those who had exposed his biases and guided him toward clarity. With each encounter, he discovered the depths of humility and resilience, becoming an embodiment of the change he once resisted. The precinct engaged in initiatives that extended beyond traditional enforcement, focusing on community building and empowerment. Programs designed to inspire and educate were yielding results, nurturing a new generation of leaders and advocates equipped with the belief that civic duty and community interests were intertwined. These actions were underpinned by a desire to ensure equity was not just aspired to, but actively woven into every decision. The city's streets, once silent witnesses to tension and strife, now thrived with optimism and brand new encounters. Murals depicting unity and hope adorned cityscapes, turning urban spaces into vibrant galleries that celebrated diversity and collective vision. Public gatherings showcased local talent and culture, fostering an environment of creativity and support. A testament to the fertile ground this reimagined community had become. No longer was the fight for change confined to words or documents. It had found vitality in the daily lives of those determined to carry the baton forward. Policy changes, once elusive, had been put into motion, with new laws reflecting the needs of the people and the voices of advocates echoing through halls of power. These laws were binding, not just because they were written, but because they were lived, forming a foundational doctrine for future generations. The black man whose courage had inadvertently sparked these shifts continued his own journey alongside others open to reformation. Within the community and beyond, he served as a beacon of perseverance, a personified reminder of how one voice could transform resignation into resolve and darkness into shared light. His influence stretched far and wide, enriching the connections spanning the city with whispers of inspiration and calls to action. Across the neighborhoods, boundaries that once divided now blurred, replaced by shared spaces where dialogue fostered empathy in place of distance. It was here that neighbors gathered over meals, studied together, shared stories and experiences that further cemented the bonds of community. Here, differences became strengths, and diversity was not to be tolerated but celebrated. Even so, awareness persisted alongside this progress. The community remained vigilant, aware that the task of justice was ongoing, requiring constant nurturing. Through all this, echoes of the past were not forgotten, but served as reminders, guiding the community as it navigated the ebb and flow of progress. Each step forward marked by reminders of lessons learned. The journey of transformation, from its inception to realization, stood as a testament to what could be achieved when collective resolve met shared humanity. This city, often defined by its vibrant tapestry of life, now bore an even deeper resilience. An understanding that change, messy and complex as it might be, was attainable when driven by unity and understanding. Standing on the precipice of a new dawn, the city welcomed the unfolding of new chapters. Here was an entity that had embraced transformation, not as an abstract trajectory, but as a living pulse woven into its every heartbeat. The chorus of voices, once nascent, now sang clear and strong, a harmonious refrain echoing through every street and boulevard. We have come this far, and together we will journey further. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft whispers, the city exhaled, renewed, vibrant and alive, with the possibilities of what the mornings held. With every echo of laughter, every decision guided by equity, and every life enriched by shared experience, the promise extended. Justice, nurtured by hearts tenacious and kind, is here to stand. As twilight unfurled its velvety cloak across the ever-awake city, A profound stillness settled like a gentle sigh. The metamorphosis the city had undergone was palpable in every corner. From bustling streets to serene parks, from newly painted murals to the hushed voices that murmured promises of a shared future. With each breath, the city reclaimed its identity, one that was more cohesive, inclusive, and resilient. The precious moments of unity and understanding achieved through countless dialogues now reverberated throughout every aspect of city life. Structures and institutions fortified by these discussions were not simply venues of authority, but became sanctuaries of hope and progress. This foundation was created stone by stone from the building blocks of empathy and shared expectations, a testament to a community's ability to rise from the ashes of discord into a renewed sense of harmony. Under the soft glow of streetlights, the officer, now a symbol of transformation within the precinct, continued along his path of redemption. He moved with newfound ease, his strides echoing with the assurance of a man who understood that true authority was rooted in service, not power, and that every interaction was merely another page in the evolving tome of justice. As he patrolled the familiar streets, each nod from a passerby or wave from a child served as a quiet redemption, an acknowledgement of the trust that had begun to weave itself anew between him and the community. Each connection, once fragile, now firmed with the common thread of reconciliation, played a melody of mutual respect, a harmony previously muted by misunderstanding. In homes throughout the city, families gathered around dinner tables, sharing stories of the remarkable journey they had all embarked upon. Older generations imparted wisdom and experiences of past struggles, while younger members listened with keen interest, their imaginations fueled by the possibility of inheriting a world less burdened by prejudice, a world they would one day contribute to. It was a time to reflect on the strides they had taken together and prepare for the work still to come, a work that demanded vigilance, resilience, and a shared vision. With each laugh, each tear, each story exchanged, the city found solace in its unity, reveling in the warmth of a community that, despite its differences, had weathered adversity and emerged all the more robust. The black man, whose quiet strength had been the spark for this profound shift, continued to inspire with his presence and leadership, providing a steady compass guiding these efforts toward enduring equity. His consistent advocacy served as a gentle reminder of the power held within each person's story, the silent testament to perseverance and hope. Its narrative, now woven intricately into the city's tapestry. In the corridors where policy met people, meaningful reforms took root, drawing on the collective input of those once marginalized. Changes once deemed unattainable became achievements celebrated in community forums, held with the dignity and humility they deserved. The city's journey of change was a melody that resonated through those who had borne witness, each note of progress echoing through time, harmonized by a choir of dreams realized and futures reimagined. By the time I got home, it became clear that this symphony bore no single conductor, but was rather an orchestra of intertwined stories that grew brighter with each day. As the night began to surrender to the soft promise of dawn, the sky stretched wide and open, enveloping the city in its vast embrace. Stars twinkled as if nodding in approval of the progress unfolding below, nurturing the quiet sentiment that while work remained, the path forged was resilient and true. Streetlights dimmed in the retreat of night's gentle curtain as the city stirred. The world continued turning, yet amidst the bustling rhythm there lay a tranquil truth, the peace of hearts aligning in shared purpose. And in this silence, moving beneath the surface like a gentle river, existed the anticipation of tomorrow, one filled with vows reinforced by unity. Finally, as the city exhaled content yet ever striving, the promise of its evolution found voice in the harmony that resonated through its streets. We are many voices, yet we sing as one. In this enduring refrain, the city found its rhythm, a rhythm not just to live by but to thrive upon. Allies formed in unexpected hands of friendship, footsteps carved into paths of understanding, and justice, once an elusive dream, stood solid, shared in each whispered breath and steadfast promise. And so, with hope that shone like dawn across its heart, the city quietly prepared to meet another day. Each heartbeat a resolute pledge to embrace change and nurture justice amid whatever shadows and possibilities the future held.